The tension between gender, sexuality, and religion is nothing new. The LGBTQIA+ community has long faced persecution and violence from religious groups that view being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender as a sin and frequently justify this with some verses from the Bible. This has made many LGBTQIA+ people feel unwelcome in religious communities, contributing to a sense of isolation and exclusion. For some people, the difference between their beliefs and who they truly are is a tough battle, especially when they have been raised in a very religious household, as was the case with Reynhard Sinaga. Only after he immigrated from his home country could he truly be himself and explore what the world had to offer him. Unfortunately, Sinaga decided to explore his deep and true desires in the most awful way and became the most prolific rapist ever in the history of the UK.
This is Reynhard Sinaga as he wanted the world to see him. His social media accounts full of grinning photos of a student having fun. But Sinaga has many faces, and behind the mask lies the truth. A depraved monster, said by prosecutors to be one of the most prolific rapists in the world.
The total number of offences that we've prosecuted is almost 160, over 48 victims. As far as the judicial process, probably anywhere in the world is concerned, he's probably the most prolific rapist that's come through the courts.
In the world.
Hey guys, welcome back to Crimeco, your go-to channel for some intriguing and incredible true crime stories. Before we continue with today's case, remember to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and turn on the notifications. Help this true crime community grow even more. So buckle up and get ready to go on a wild ride with us. Reynhard Sinaga was born on February 19, 1983 in Jambi, Sumatra, Indonesia. He came from a very well-off background, as his father worked in banking, and after his retirement, he invested in the palm oil industry, which is an important asset to Indonesia's economy. As a result, Sinaga grew up in a wealthy household where his parents spoiled him and gave him everything he wanted. But there was one thing that he wanted the most, and sadly, it was an impossible dream as he was raised as a Catholic. Sinaga had to keep his homosexuality well hidden from his parents, who expected him to marry a woman, settle down, and start a family. So slowly but surely, he began to make a plan in which he could get that thing he wanted the most, freedom. He decided to focus on his studies, so he put his emphasis on getting a degree in architecture at the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Indonesia, which he finally got in 2006. His parents were proud of him, but at the same time, it was an unspoken rule that after college, he was supposed to settle down with a respectable woman and start a family. However, Sinaga had other plans. He convinced his parents to let him go to further his studies abroad, since a higher level of education would be more beneficial when the time came for other families to look for decent husbands for their daughters. So in 2007, he moved to the UK on a student visa to start another degree at the University of Manchester, where he got his Master of Arts in Sociology in 2011. The next year, he started another major, but this time at the University of Leeds. He seemed to be a very intelligent and gifted student, but he wasn't clever enough to avoid getting caught in 2017. Since he moved to the UK, Manchester, to be more specific, Sinaga got the freedom he craved for so many years. The city gave him the push he needed to go out there into the real world and finally be able to express himself as he was. He was happy to be able to live openly as a gay man without having his family reject him because they couldn't accept that their son was homosexual. The area in which he settled down was a very privileged one. Although in his first years he lived in student accommodation, Sinaga later moved to a more comfortable apartment in Montana House on Princess Street in 2011. Of course, with the financial help of his father, he was living in the downtown area of Manchester, near the very popular Manchester Gays Village, which was filled with gay bars and restaurants and welcomed not only members of the LGBTQIA, but also curious tourists. It was in that area that Sinaga used to pick up his victims. The beginning of the end started with a single phone call to the police on June 2, 2017. The the police received a phone call from a young rugby player who claimed that Sinaga attempted to rape him. The young man stated that he was on his way home after a night out when Sinaga invited him to his place to have a few more drinks. He agreed to it, although he was visibly drunk, which made him a perfect target for Sinaga. Once they got to the apartment, Sinaga offered him a drink that contained a powerful drug, probably GHB, and then attempted to rape the man. While he was it, the young rugbyer suddenly came to his senses, and a fight ensued trying to get out of that place. Sinaga wasn't very tall, nor did he have a muscular complexion, so the fight with the rugbyer left him in pretty bad shape, and he had to be hospitalized. When the police arrived, they saw Sinaga barely conscious on the floor. Initially, given the circumstances and the look of the scene, they arrested the rugby player for serious bodily injury. However, according to what the rugbyer told the police on the phone, that he grew more and more suspicious of Sinaga. So when the ambulance came, he was taken to the hospital, where he was tied to a bed as a precaution. The police also took his mobile phone and requested the PIN number from him. Trying to play fool, he first gave the incorrect PIN number, but after some back and forth, he eventually gave them the correct one. After an initial search on Sinaga's phone, the police officers scrolled their way to the phone's video folder, and what they found there was both shocking and perverse. The latest video showed Sinaga taking advantage of the drunk rugby player, and it also revealed that the guy had indeed been raped, as he suspected. While still in the hospital bed, Sinaga was arrested for 1 count of rape, and investigations soon started. But that video was only the tip of the iceberg. The police returned to Sinaga's apartment and discovered dozens of phones, driver's licenses, student IDs, wallets, watches, and Facebook screenshots of guys. It was too soon to make theories, but it seemed that Sinaga had also raped all of these men, which was confirmed when they found hundreds of hours of footage of him abusing them. For Sinaga, the footage of their suffering served as mementos for his crimes. Totally devious. It was discovered that Reynhard's targets were mostly heterosexual men in their late teens or early 20s who had been drinking, often at nightclubs near his place. The majority of his victims lived in Manchester at the time, and 26 were students when they were attacked. Some were on their way home, while others had been separated from their groups of friends. Many were too drunk to remember their conversation with him, but those who didn't think that Sinaga had any ulterior motives. Some of them recalled that Sinaga was very nice and polite. He used various pretexts to lure each victim to his place. He would either offer them a place to relax or help them call a taxi. When these victims arrived at his department, they were handed a drink mixed with a strong narcotic, and it was the last thing they remembered. The illegal substance of his choice was gamma-hydroxybutyric acid, more commonly known as GHB. GHB is a narcotic that is used to treat sleep disorders and anxiety. It works by calming the nervous system. However, at high dosages, it might cause unconsciousness, confusion, and memory loss. It seemed that Sinaga would rape the men while they were unconscious, filming them while he was at it just for entertainment purposes. It was believed that he also videotaped his assaults to collect the footage as his trophies. Since the majority of his victims were heterosexual, Sinaga took great pride in turning them gay, like all of it was just some part of a sick game. Police investigations revealed that the first attack they could confirm occurred on New Year's Day 2015. When a guy was out for a night out, and the next thing he remembered was waking up at Sinaga's apartment covered in vomit, with no idea how he got there. Sinaga pretended to be concerned and told the victim that he was too drunk to drive home, so he offered him a place to stay. The victim apologized to Sinaga and left, unaware of what really happened to him until 2 years later. Once the police found out about Sinaga's modus operandi and found lots of personal belongings of potential victims, it was time to look for these men. It was a hard task, but eventually, thanks to those personal belongings and Sinaga's trophies, they were able to track down 48 possible victims. It wasn't an easy job. Just imagine that the police show up at your door and suddenly tell you that it's very possible that you have been the victim of a rapist. And to make matters worse, you were drugged, so that's why you probably don't remember anything. Anyone would be in shock after hearing such news, and some would even be ashamed, as Sinaga's vast majority of victims were straight men. However, at least 60 victims remained unidentified. According to the police, Sinaga was suspected of raping at least 206 males between January 2015 and his arrest in 2017. But let's go back to highlight an important detail about this case. It was established that most of Sinaga's victims were heterosexual men, and this detail was of high importance to the prosecutors in this case because it showed a key attribute in Sinaga's personality. He purposefully went after straight men, and then he took great pride in himself for turning them gay. He took advantage of these men, knowing very well that they wouldn't say anything, even if they suspected that something had happened to them. The underlying issues with this lie deeply in the stigmatization of men being sexually assaulted, and nonetheless by another male. Although the times have changed, it's still a taboo subject to talk about. Men who have been through this usually feel so ashamed, violated, and repulsed by what happened that they refuse to admit it to themselves or others. A great number of Sinaga's victims decided not to go through the trial because of this reasoning. However, several other men faced their rapist with great courage and determination in court, hoping that he would pay for what he did to them. Sinaga thought and planned his attacks really well, and this showed everyone in court how conniving and devious he was. After his arrest, he went through 4 different trials. The reason behind this probably had to do with the fact that more and more victims were identified and decided to proceed with charges. 4 trials were held between June 1st and July 10th, 2018 for his crimes against 13 victims, April 1st and May 7th, 2019 for crimes against 12 victims, September 16th and October 4th, 2019 for crimes against 10 victims, and December 2019 for offenses against an additional 13 victims. Even though the evidence against him was strong and substantial, Sinaga had the audacity to plead not guilty to all charges. And to top it all, he refused to acknowledge the content of all the footage found in his house. So not only the jury, but also the victims had to watch several hours of sensitive footage to prove the veracity of the charges. Sinaga's callousness was on plain display during each of these sessions, and he didn't even show an ounce of remorse or empathy for his victims. It seemed like he really enjoyed reliving those awful actions and rejoiced with the fact that now his victims were aware of the severity of what he had done to them. Sinaga's defense was a bluff. He stated that all of his victims were not victims because the sexual relationships were all consensual. Despite the fact that practically all of his victims were heterosexual and clearly asleep in the recordings, he insisted that they were all one-night stands. But how could those encounters be consensual when it was clearly visible and audible that most of the victims were snoring? Sinaga knew he had no way out of it, but on his twisted mind, he was determined to go through all the trials and make everyone spectator of his perversions. Finally, all 4 trials found Sinaga guilty and convicted him of crimes against 48 victims, including 136 counts of rape, 14 counts of sexual assault, 8 counts of attempted rape, and 1 act of assault by penetration. In the end, Sinaga was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 30 years before he could petition for parole. The Court of Appeal later increased this to 40 years on December 11, 2020. If he ever gets eligible for parole, his release date would be around 2060, when he would be 77 years old. Reynhard's criminal acts and lack of remorse or conscience provided a clear picture of a dangerous person. His thorough documentation of his crimes, the light of the trials, and attempts to be the center of attention by pleading not guilty all exposed his depravity. Perhaps his family's wealth and influence in Indonesia contributed to his personality, making him feel entitled to get everything he wanted, no matter the cost. Well, folks, that's all for today. Thank you for staying all the way up to the end of this video. If you're down for this type of content, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We'll also love to know what you think about our content, so leave a comment and tell us all about it. See you next time.